Hi, this is Grace Taylor Loring. I'm a career advisor with the Illich School of Business in the Career Services Office. I've been here for about 1 year. I've been a recruiter for about 10 years. The purpose of this video is for you to learn one of the most common interview techniques employers use, the STAR method. This works across the board for internships, part-time positions, full-time positions, graduate school, leadership roles. The purpose of behavioral interviewing is to measure objectively the potential of an employee's past behaviors as a predictor for future results. I'll say that one more time. The purpose of mastering behavioral interviews is so that you can allow employers to objectively measure your future results based on your past behaviors. In behavioral interviews, candidates are asked to give specific examples of when they demonstrated a particular behavior or skill. By the end of this video, you will know how to organize your experiences into clear, confident interview answers and how to tell compelling stories to get you hired. Again, employers are not trying to trick you, just trying to predict your behaviors. Some of those behaviors that they might be evaluating, amongst many other ones, could be communication, problem solving, adaptability, coachability, perseverance, and accountability. I'd love to walk through, I'll take a pause between each of these questions, but would love to know which of these behaviors are being evaluated based on these questions. First, describe a time you solved a difficult problem. Here we're measuring problem solving. Paint a picture about a time you handled conflict. Here we're measuring communication. Share with me about a mistake you made. We're answering about perseverance. Give me an example of when you demonstrated leadership. Here we're measuring adaptability. Tell me about a time you had to learn something unexpectedly. Here we're measuring coachability. And last but not least, tell me about a time you failed. Here we might be measuring accountability. As you can see, some of these questions might be interchangeable to different behaviors depending on the situation. So it's important to slow down, take a breath, and fully actively listen before you answer. Walking through the STAR method. So the STAR method is a useful acronym, and it's an effective formula for structuring your response. This is the ultimate breakdown. So S should be about 20% of your answer. And it is for situation. So explaining the situation so that your interviewer understands the context of your example. They don't need to know every detail, but they need to know the contextual details. Next is task. So you're going to talk about the task, problem, or challenge that you took responsibility for completing or the goal of your efforts. A is for action. Describe the actions that you personally took to complete the task or reach the end goal. Highlight your skills or character traits addressed in these questions. And R is for result. Explain the positive outcomes or results of your actions or efforts. It's important here to highlight quantifiable results. And don't worry, we'll walk through this one more time. So a quick example. Tell me about a time when you demonstrated leadership. You could say, I tutored kids in math. Or you could provide some context to your interviewer and demonstrate your skills through an engaging example like, when I was a junior in high school, there were several students in my math class who were struggling with some of the more difficult and complex concepts. With an upcoming national exam, I was asked by my math teacher to start an after-school session to assist the other students. I stayed after school twice a week to review materials and homework. I created a comprehensive study guide. I demonstrated the best math methods for solving difficult problems and explained strategies that worked for me and developed new problems for them to practice on. Our class average for the national exam was the highest it had been in over 10 years. And overall, the students I helped were able to develop a better understanding and appreciation for math. So let's walk through each letter. Again, starting with situation, we want to set the scene. Where were you? When was this? Who is involved? Keep this short. This is, again, the contextual details. Not everybody needs to know everything about working at Best Buy, but more so the who, the what, the when here. I was working as a cashier at Best Buy during Black Friday. Our store was short-staffed, and customer wait times had increased significantly. This should be about, again, 20% of your answer, maybe 1 to 2 sentences. Next is task. This will be a little bit less, about 10% of your answer. We want to explain your responsibility. What did you need to have happen? What challenges were you responsible for? My responsibility was to keep the checkout lines moving efficiently while providing excellent customer service. Again, what needed to be accomplished? Don't just jump to actions, but really clearly state what your intentions were and what your challenges were. The bulk of your STAR method is spent in action. This is the space that is the most important. Explain exactly what you did using I personal pronoun statements rather than what we did or our team did. How did I organize? I created, I prioritized, I collaborated, I communicated. I quickly opened another register, communicated expected wait times to customers, and coordinated with my supervisor to redirect employees from stocking shelves to assisting with checkout. Again, this should be about 60 to 70% of your answer should be spent in action. This is where you really want to shine a light on your skills and your traits and your characteristics. And last but not least is R for result. How did things end? These could be both quantifiable, so discussing what was increased or decreased, what was improved or completed or earned or learned. This also could be qualitative as well, or maybe reflective information. What would you do differently? What did you learn? What feedback would you provide? How would you apply those skills to this position? As a result, customer wait times decreased as a result, we cleared the checkout line within 20 minutes, and my manager recognized me for adapting while under pressure. Even if the result isn't perfect, talk about what you learned. Your growth also is important in what you accomplished. Again, I definitely in here, if you can add in the quantifiable information and the qualitative information, is super effective. So some common mistakes before we go through some examples. Stories are too long sometimes. Your answer should be maybe 1 to 2 minutes. A lot of the times people miss the result. It's important to remember your impact. Talking about what we did, employers want to know about your contributions. And giving hypothetical answers. This might come up especially if you're emerging into the workforce. Maybe you're applying to cohorts or internships or part-time positions. Interviewers don't expect you to have experienced everything in life. They do expect you to be honest, adaptable, reflective, introspective. If you don't have a perfect example, there's no need to invent one. You should use a similar example or maybe explain how you would approach the situation. Your ability to think critically can be just as valuable as if you've done this before. A general rule of thumb, obviously, talk about your professional experience. You can also talk about class projects, internships, volunteer work, campus organization work, extracurriculars, athletics. Ultimately, the goal is not necessarily giving the right answer, but rather giving the answer that's most applicable to your experience and something that can allow you to tell a clear story, allow you space to paint a narrative and tell a story and paint a picture. So let's go through a couple of examples. Example 1, tell me about a time you had to solve a difficult problem. During my marketing strategy course, my team was assigned a semester-long project to develop a marketing campaign for a local business. About halfway through the project, a few group members were not contributing consistently, which put us at risk for missing important deadlines. I felt it was important to help get the project back on track. I also couldn't complete my portion of the project until I received the market research from the missing group members. I scheduled a team meeting to discuss where we stood on the project and identify any challenges. During that conversation, I learned some of my teammates were balancing heavy course loads and full-time work. We reassigned responsibilities based on each person's availability and strengths, created a shared project timeline, and scheduled weekly check-ins. I also volunteered to coordinate everyone's work to make sure that the final presentation was consistent. Our team completed every assignment on time, submitted the project before the deadline, and earned an A. Our communication improved throughout the remainder of the semester, and everyone contributed to the final project. I learned that addressing challenges early and approaching difficult conversations with empathy can keep teams moving forward. You see how each section naturally flows into the next. Here's another example. Tell me about a time you had a conflict or a disagreement with a colleague. I'll take a minute. You can think about your own experience before we answer together. So in this context, during my finance internship, another intern and I were responsible for preparing the monthly expense report for our supervisor. We disagreed on how much time we should spend reviewing the data before submitting it. We were expected to deliver an accurate report by the end of month deadline. I wanted to complete the one final quality check to ensure everything was accurate, while my colleague felt we should submit it immediately since we were already ahead of schedule. I suggested a compromise by dividing the report into sections and reviewing only the data each of us had prepared. We also compared the final totals against the previous month's report to identify any unusual variances before submitting it. I focused on understanding my colleagues' concerns about meeting the deadline while explaining why a brief quality check could prevent unnecessary corrections later. Our review took less than 15 minutes. We identified 2 formatting inconsistencies and 1 data entry error as well that we would have had to revise after submission. We still submitted the report ahead of time. Our supervisor complimented the accuracy and professionalism of our work, and the report didn't require any follow-up corrections. Conflict questions are really good. You might get a lot of conflict questions. Tell me about a time you failed, or what was the worst thing that happened in your career, or what was a time that you received feedback that you disagreed with. These are all really good questions in which somebody wants to put you on the spot and understand how you're going to deal through communication, adaptability, and your coachability. These are some great practice questions. I definitely encourage you to screenshot this. Every experience can be answered through multiple interview questions. As we discussed before, one internship that you have, one experience that you have can provide answers to explain your leadership abilities, your conflict resolution, communication, problem solving, and time management, amongst many things. I encourage you to practice these out loud, to talk about this in the mirror or with a friend or with a mentor, somebody that you trust, that you can, practice these questions with. You can also practice the STAR method just in your everyday life. Somebody asks you about how did your date go. Maybe you discuss the situation, your task, the actions that you took, and how that encounter occurred. But again, it's so, so important to practice out loud. You can also check out, too, the Illich Career Services Canvas module. Oh. Canvas module for an entire list of mock interview questions based on major and based on the behavior that they're measuring. So last but not least, some final tips. Again, it's important to keep your answers about 1 to 2 minutes long. Focus on your actions. I would definitely encourage you again to practice out loud. I would prepare about 5 to 7 star stories before every interview, ideally in different behaviors. Quantify your results when possible. And last but not least, I mean, it's not necessarily, STAR method is not necessarily about memorizing scripts. It's about being able to organize your experiences into clear, memorable stories. So before your interviews, again, I encourage you to identify a handful of experiences that highlight different strengths, and whether that be through leadership, teamwork, problem solving, conflict resolution, adaptability, and then practice telling each of those stories using the STAR framework. With preparation and repetition, you'll be able to adapt those stories to answer a wide variety of behavioral interview questions with confidence. If you would like to practice past that, the Illich Career Services does offer mock interviewing available online. You can book through Handshake as well. Thank you so much for coming.